Dear students, parents, family, friends, trustees, and colleagues, welcome. I'm Steve Sagarin, Director of Berkshire Waldorf High School. This evening continues one of the school's longest, oldest traditions, hearing from members of the senior class regarding their travel projects and internships. But before we begin, I want to thank the Mahaiwe Performing Arts Center for making it possible for us to be here, and the staff, especially Lucas Pavelski, Thomas Randall, Anders Johansson, and Joseph Quirinali. And I also want to thank family and friends who are here tonight for supporting the school, and especially the class of 2024 through all the days and the years that bring them to this evening and to the end of high school. I want to thank you for your support in another way too, and by that I mean for your donations. Every donation makes it possible to give all of our students the best education possible. And your donations move us closer to a permanent home. In looking at my notes, I discovered that last year I reported that we had raised almost $3.5 million toward our new building. This year, I can tell you that we have purchased the building, started construction in March, and have raised more than $7 million. The finish line is in sight, and we are on track to be in our new building to begin the school year in September 2025. If you want to help us increase that amount, there is a giving page on our website. Thank you. At our school, seniors spend approximately a month, and sometimes a lot more than that, finding something to do that takes them out of the school and into the world. Some travel, some work as pre-professionals, some pursue the arts or trades in greater depth than they can do during the school day. And every year, on a night like this, we honor and acknowledge the remarkable, talented, mature, individual young persons who graduate from our school. Following Johann Junkins, students will present in reverse alphabetical order.
Good evening. My name is Johann Junkins, and for my senior project, I learned the prelude from Bach's Sixth Unaccompanied Suite. Those of you who know me will know that I play cello, but ever since the pandemic, things have basically stopped. My teacher was on a sabbatical, and the orchestra I played in stopped having sessions for a few years, and honestly, I was burnt out. So fast forward to March, I'm sitting in my room, searching for music, and I find the Sixth Bach Suite. I had heard it before, but at this point, I hadn't appreciated it. I basically instantly fell in love. So I brought it to my teacher, Nat Park, who was a professor at Bennington College and my mentor, and I told him I wanted to play. He said that it was a wonderful idea, and he asked me how long I have. I said I had 2 months and some change, and he said, we should choose a new piece. I learned quickly the wisdom of his words. This piece is really hard, and one of the hardest that I've ever played, and to make it even harder, it's one of the fastest pieces I've ever learned. It's not perfect, but I'm proud of what I was able to accomplish in 2 months, and it's also the most physically taxing piece I've ever done. I broke one of my bows practicing. It would have been a great photo to have, but we shipped it off 2 days ago, so oh well. My other struggle is my small thumbs. If I hold them up, maybe some of you can see that my left thumb is half the size of my right. I don't know if you can see, but this presents a slight challenge, and I've had to learn some ways to get around it. Okay, well, I could procrastinate playing this piece all night, so I might as well just get it done. Thank you for listening.
Hello, my name is Aiden Zuckerman Hood, and for my senior project, I spent time exploring art and architecture in Germany this spring. Our German class traveled there along with my German teacher, Herr Hamelroth, and our chaperone, Zach and Dringa. We traveled in April and spent 3 weeks exploring the country. We visited Berlin, Dresden, Munich, Eichstätt, and many more cities. The first museum I visited in Germany was the Gemälde Alter Meister, or the Old Masters Gallery in Dresden. After nearly an hour of proving to the museum that we were a student group, we were allowed in. A while after we began walking around the museum, I stopped in a gallery and stretched my arms above my head. Almost immediately, an older German woman rapidly approached me and said, "No sports." I looked at her confused and told her I was just stretching, and she continued to explain to me how I'm not allowed to do athletic activities in the museum. Next. I was able to see a collection of work by one of my favorite artists, Sandro Botticelli. Maria with Christ and St. John depicts a calm, beautiful, thinly veiled Mary, as well as a veiled baby Jesus Christ and St. John in prayer, all in Botticelli's simple linear form. Next. I also saw Madonna of the Pomegranate, another image of Mary and Christ, now in a circular canvas or tondo. Next. The most notable difference between American and German architecture is the age. For example, my house in Stockbridge is about 200 years old, which is remarkably old in the States, almost, while most of the buildings in Eichstätt date back to the 12th and 13th century. I was able to see many examples of Gothic and Baroque architecture. In the Eichstätt Cathedral, I was able to see a classic stained glass window and the themes that this cathedral was trying to impart on its congregants. This cathedral has a beautiful Baroque facade completed in 1718 by Gabriele de Gabrieli, the architect of Eichstätt, who the school Gabrieli Gymnasium was named after, which is the school that we studied at. It is truly amazing to experience a small town with nearly the same population of Stockbridge, but with such a deep culture tracing back hundreds of years that is preserved so beautifully. Next. Next. Munich quickly became one of my favorite cities in Germany. Along with the architecture, it has an amazing collection of art. I visited the Neue Pinakothek and the Alte Pinakothek with my host family on a beautiful spring day. Though my personal focus and interest is in classical art, I appreciated the Neue Pinakothek, which has contemporary, modern, and postmodern art. I saw a beautiful collection of Bauhaus interior design pieces, including a simplistic Rothko chair and, next, a simple woven chair. I also saw other Bauhaus items such as a chess set and a bicycle. The Alte Pinakothek truly had a gorgeous collection, but I wasn't able to spend as much time there. Next. There was a large collection of work by Peter Paul Rubens. Some of the more breathtaking pieces I saw there was the Martyrdom of St. Lawrence, a piece depicting a bright, anguished figure, St. Lawrence, being held to a hot iron grill. Next. And The Virgin as the Apocalyptic Women, which is one of my favorite pieces. It's magnificently large, and it forces you to crane up your neck to appreciate the entire glowing, momentous scene. There are two angels with wings which are beautifully framing the scene above the mother and child. I felt my life in the art world solidify on this trip. I was able to lose myself in art for hours with no desire to stop. I truly appreciated the opportunity of being able to experience just a taste of the art world in Germany, and I will never forget it. Thank you to the school for this amazing opportunity, and thank you all so much for coming.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Walker. Thank you all for being here. I knew from the very beginning of senior projects that I wanted to do mine around welding, but I wasn't initially sure what that would look like. I briefly considered interning with an established welder or at an auto body shop, but I ultimately decided to do something on my own and make a table. I was first introduced to welding a couple years ago when I participated in a building project for school where I welded several mornings a week, hand-fashioning iron supports for the structure. I reached back out to my mentor from this past project to help me out and work out the details like measurements and which metals to use. I worked at her barn studio house for a few weeks in Harlemville, New York, practicing my technique and figuring out the cost for my metal. Finding the right metal was an adventure, and I visited several junkyards in people's backyards who had stashes of potentially the right stuff. Ultimately, I found the steel I needed in an Albany steel yard. Steel is not cheap. Once I had all materials set and my plan for the table finalized, I started cutting the pieces to size. I used a grinder for the majority of it, as I didn't have the right saws and an investment in the tools was not in my project budget. This worked, but it definitely made some of the pieces inaccurate in size. I began to work on my project more at home, and my neighbor, who is a contractor, helped me out with specifics with it. He helped with cutting my steel more precisely, as he had the ideal tools. I was able to use his metal saws to make pieces more precise. Once I had all the metal cut to size, I moved all my supplies to my classmate's house, Oscar, where we could each work in his garage on our projects. I beveled the edges of all the metal so that it would be easier when I welded them together. When I started the welding process, the pieces of the table together, I ran into some difficulty. The cuts I had originally made were uneven and some were longer than others. This took a lot of grinding and adjusting the sections until I was able to weld them together. Once the frame was complete, I moved on to making the tabletop. I used a slab of maple wood and cut it to the size I needed. I then sanded it and polished it with stain. My original idea was to use an 1/8-inch steel, 1 inch by 1 inch for the frame, but I thought it would be safe to go with something thicker. So I bought a 1/4 inch thickness. When I started cutting the metal and really started planning it out, I realized the steel was way too thick and bulky. This was a big mistake that cost me hours of my time, as cutting it and sizing it was much harder. Also, when the pieces were ready for welding, I realized another mistake. Some of the segments I cut were too long, but in the end I welded everything together just fine. Another small mistake I made was cutting the tabletop too small. I noticed this too late and had to buy more wood to cut to the correct size. I learned that I needed to have more patience and not jump ahead without checking to make sure everything was correct. It also taught me resilience after mistakes I made and perseverance. This was a big lesson for me as it set me back many more hours on my project. I want to thank my 2 mentors for guiding me through this project and teaching me techniques that I didn't know before. They were instrumental in helping me form and execute my plan by letting me use their tools and spaces. This project experience was up and down. It definitely was not easy, but well worth it in the end. This gave me a new perspective on how difficult welding can be, and that patience is a key trait to have while working. I am planning on getting my welder's license this summer, and I hope to go to welding school next year. If anyone has any interest in welding, I suggest a project like making a simple furniture and see how it goes for you. It's definitely not easy, but well worth it in the end. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Oscar Smeraldo. Thank you for coming tonight. I traveled with our class to Germany, but tonight I will share my senior project. Next. I've always been interested in welding, and I've always loved working with my hands. Earlier this year, I worked with a blacksmith to forge a medieval-looking dagger for one of Mr. Sagren's classes. This experience led me to wonder what it would be like to make something more ambitious on a larger scale that also has a day-to-day purpose. Next. I was able to set up a workspace in our garage under the guidance of Matt Crane, a local welder, artist, and sculptor. I visited Matt in his workshop in North Chatham, and he gave me some scrap metal to practice on. The challenge of learning how to weld is to not be afraid of the sparks or heat. When you're welding, you're basically drawing by melting steel wire up to 6,000 to 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit and pushing a puddle of metal along 2 separate pieces of metal. It's definitely not safe without the right protective gear. I needed a quality welder's helmet to protect my eyes and face, as well as heat-resistant gloves. With Matt's help, I made a drawing to scale of the bench and figured out the angles that I needed the metal to be cut at. I ordered 3x3 by 1/8" hot rolled steel from Albany Steel and picked it up later in that week, calling Matt whenever I needed his guidance. Next. Here is the beginning of the frame of the bench, which I designed to look like an abstract mountain. Welding the bench was pretty straightforward, but MIG welding is hot and dirty. As I progressed, I used a grinder to make the welds flush. Next, again. To finish the bench, I bought 3 10-foot cedar boards, which I cut and sanded smooth, finishing it by staining the wood to bring out the grain. My dad helped me bolt the wooden planks to the bench. Here is the finished bench under our trees. I would like to thank my advisor, Matt Crane, for all of his help, and I'd like to thank my dad and my mom, especially my dad, for helping me with this project. Enjoy the rest of the presentations. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anwesha, and I was a part of the school's trip to Argentina, but I'm going to present on my independent project that I made. I made a podcast series where I interviewed 3 Latin American immigrants living in the Berkshires. I worked with Tom Ferris, this gentleman right here, at the Berkshire radio station in Great Barrington, and I also attended a radio show hosting and podcasting apprenticeship with Rydingsword Youth Project, where I learned some basics of recording and editing. My podcast series was 3 episodes featuring 3 guest speakers, Alejandra Noyes, Livia Rodriguez Morales, and Liliana Atonasio. I prepared a list of questions for them to answer. My first guest was Alejandra. Next slide. She is from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and she has come here 7 years ago. She is 27 and a medical assistant and volunteers in medicine. She was a youth worker at Rydingsword Youth Project where I first met her. This picture is not current, this is from September at the Latino Festival. And when I asked her to be my guest on my podcast, she was overjoyed. She could now expose America all that she wanted. Like me, she found the transition from Buenos Aires to the Berkshires quite overwhelming. She talked about how she had very late dinners in Argentina. I could relate to that a lot. I too was used to very late dinners back home, and my host family here would have dinner by 7 p.m. and I would go to bed hungry for the first 6 months. I was too shy to get more food from the kitchen. Alejandra is also from a big city and finds living in the tight-knit community too intimidating due to the lack of privacy, because you always run into people at the co-op or anywhere. You just run into people, you know people everywhere. But we both agree on how networking and attracting opportunities is easier in such a case. She thought that people here are articulate and selective of their words, while Argentinians talk very fast and therefore do not pay much attention to what they say. But people here can also be overly sensitive, which makes it very harder for individuals to express their true opinions. Sometimes they can also be overly positive when I just want them to be true critics. Like, just tell me, I don't care, tell me the truth. Overall, she said that she wouldn't live in the Berkshires if she had more resources and economic opportunities back in Argentina. My second guest was Livia Rodriguez Morales, who came to the Berkshires 7 years ago as well through her summer exchange program. So we talked a lot more about on my podcast, which I posted on YouTube, about the summer exchange opportunities for Latin American countries. And she's from Minas Gerais, from Brazil, which is a big city 2 hours away from Rio de Janeiro. She felt an instant connection when she learned about Great Barrington for the first time. She's very happy to be living in the Berkshires. She feels very safe and connected to the natural world, which is not a possibility for her back in Brazil. She also loved how mental health is prioritized in the US, which is not yet a thing in most countries outside of here. Like my mom used to beat me all the way from school to home when I came second in class and not first, And guess what? I'm fine. I don't have any traumas or anything. So, and another thing is, when we think about America, it's also metropolitan in New York City and LA, but we don't really have an idea that America has such a big coverage of farmland. So we also bonded over that experience of living so close to the natural world. Okay. Both of our working class parents sent us to English medium schools thinking that it would be better for our professional lives later. That made me wonder how English has become the standardized language for the world. And I'm not sure if it's good or bad, if it's still an effect of colonization, or I don't know. But anyway, Anna had a very interesting question, which was one of my favorites, which was what were the differences that all of my guests noticed while communicating to the people here or in this country in general. And we talked about the differences, communication among the people in both the countries. She appreciates how Americans are very good at setting boundaries, like saying no to things, which is not really appreciated in other cultures. Like, she gave very specific examples, which all four of the people who were part of this project completely related to. Like, we cannot say no to elders, even we are not comfortable with them. So yeah, I really love that thing, or all of us love that thing about America. The next thing we talked about were humor. Humor is something so deeply rooted in one's cultural upbringing. Me and Livia, we both didn't find Americans funny when we came here. Like, we struggled. Like, half of the things were not funny, or more than half of the things. Like, I literally struggled with Mr. Sagarin's jokes so much. Like, they were so lame. I'm sorry. They were so lame. Like, oh, the first genetics course. Oh my God. I just laughed so that he would give me that A+, but I mean, it worked. But yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so my next and last guest speaker was Liliana. She's so lovely. I love her vibe. She's so nice. She is the president of Latinas 413 and a mother of 2 teenage daughters. She came to the US 15 years ago, which is an important component of our conversation. And she's very grateful to be a part of this whole community, and she loves Massachusetts over New York. I'm sorry, New York residents. And yeah, she just finds better resources and opportunities in terms of insurance and availability of things near her house. And she noted how the Berkshires has changed over the past 15 years in terms of racial and cultural inclusivity. During her first year, she would find nobody at doctors' offices or other public spaces who spoke Spanish. But in the past 5 to 7 years, there has been a surge in the Latino and BIPOC population, which is great, because Berkshire is mostly white. I'm sorry. Although she has experienced racism and ignorance, the generosity of the community surpasses it all. So yeah, thank you. That was my presentation.
Good evening. My name is Ella Rydingsword, and this spring I traveled with our school group to Argentina, but tonight I'll be presenting on printmaking. For my project, I experimented with 2 different printmaking styles, block printing and jelly printing, to create prints of Argentina and the Berkshires. For the block printing, I focused on the main images that popped into my head when I thought of each place: mosquitoes in the new school building. For the jelly printing, I concentrated on the colors and shape of the Andes mountain ranges versus the Berkshire Hills. I did all the printmaking at my house, taking up a whole living room wall, much to my brother's chagrin. So, can you go back, please? So, you might be asking, like, why off and mosquitoes for Argentina? So I arrived at my host family's house, and the first thing I noticed as I walked in is that off bug spray cans were lining the whole entire staircase. And the next morning, they were like, you should put some bug spray on before you go. You're gonna really need it. So I took the spray can and I went outside and put a little bit on in each spot, as we do in the Berkshires. And then I walked back into the house, and there's this massive cloud of off, and they're all drenched in it. And later that day, I learned why they drenched themselves in it, because it's impossible to get the mosquitoes off of you in Argentina. So block printing is the process of taking a block, in my case, a rubber block, and carving away the excess rubber to create a negative image. After I have carved, I use a brayer to roll the ink onto the carving, and with the ink still wet, I press it onto a piece of paper. And the scariest and most anxious part about block printing is when you peel the paper back to see whether or not it had worked, because like any little smudge or too much paint ruins the whole thing. Next. So jelly printing is the process of taking about this size jelly-like pad and applying acrylic paint to it, to the image you want, and then pressing it on to a piece of paper. And I did, I think I counted over hundreds of monoprints to create one image. So these are the Berkshire Hills. And can you go? This is me creating the Andes mountain range. It's a time lapse. So I would like to thank my mentors, Genevieve Broussard and David Value, for helping me through my creative ruts in the process. So you can see, and then I also did layers of paper too to add, I thought add more depth. But there's like a giant contrast between colors in the two. Next. I learned that I don't like block printing. That's too exact, and there's little room for error. And ultimately, I just end up really frustrated because like any little smudge or thing just like made it imperfect, and it ruined the whole print. I found I like jelly printing because it's much more room for creativity, and I enjoyed that it was kind of like a puzzle that I had to line up each monoprint to make the whole thing. Through creating these pieces, I realized how much I benefited from reflecting on the past and creating from it. I learned that I enjoy making pieces after I travel, and I plan on doing it from now on. Thank you, and have a nice night.
Good evening. My name is Ethan Lin. This past spring, I went to Argentina with 10 other students and 2 chaperones, Dorian Jackson and Julia Nunez. I'll be presenting on some of our time in Patagonia. We were there for 2 nights and 2 days. I'll be talking about the day we visited the Perito Moreno Glacier. We arrived at the glaciers early in the morning and had the opportunity to go on a boat tour to get a close-up view. And this was our view from the boat. We moved on to the main part of the glaciers. Next. And walked along pathways for the next few hours to look at them. Being there made me feel in awe, and it made me feel small. The landscape was beautiful with all the colors and ice. Next. At this point, I had been wanting to do a creative project, and I decided to attempt an oil painting, which I had never done before. So this was my reference photo for what I tried. And luckily, I had a large selection of oil paints and other materials I could borrow because they're quite expensive. I had a makeshift setup in my basement using trash bins and other items to prop up all my things. I decided to do a time lapse as well to show. I'd say in total it took about 6 hours, and the time just flew by. But I spent a lot of time mixing paints. Off to the side, you can't see. But I had to redo things a few times as well. I should have added music. No. It's almost over. I tried using a few different techniques for the mountains. All right. Oh, never mind. Okay, next slide. This is my final product. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out for not previously using oil paints. I'd say the most difficult part of it was trying to make the ice look like ice. And I tried using some different techniques. And just, it was overall a good learning experience. And I think it went pretty well. It was a pretty messy process. If you've worked with oil paints before, you know what I mean. I stained some pants. I also got a bit lightheaded from the fumes. But I loved it and would do it again. I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped me with my project, especially to Profe for organizing the trip to Argentina this year. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Owen Lamond, and this is less of a traditional project, and it's more like a smorgasbord of everything I've done in the last year in terms of music and sound design, which is what I'm going to college for. So probably the biggest thing out of everything was I did a year-long internship with Allison Larkin, and for the 4 people here who don't know who she is, she's a comedian, a voice actress. She couldn't be here tonight because she's doing a one-woman comedy show which opens tonight. But I did everything from audio editing to recording to mastering the art of AI transcribing software. And I think the most important part of this job is that it taught me a lot about communication. I think the best example I can give was during February break. We were emailing back and forth. She wanted me to be in the booth to record an interview with a friend of hers. And so we set a date for that, and she said, okay, the day before that, we're going to do a sound check. So, okay, her studio's at our house, so on the day of the sound check, I went to her house after school. It's 30 seconds from the school. And I knocked on the door, and there was no answer. And I walked inside, and her dog started jumping on me and barking. And I called her, and I said, Allison, I'm here for the sound check. And she said, I thought you were doing that on your own. And I was like, I guess we never talked about it, but I thought it was pretty natural for me to assume it would be at her house. Anyway, so I thought, okay, I'll just do it on my phone. And so I typed in the software into Google on my phone, and very quickly found out that the software doesn't work on phones. So I got in my car and I drove to Johann's house to use his desktop. So, you know, I was 15 minutes late, but thankfully the guy was pretty nice. But definitely, I should have emailed her 20 million times confirming all the details. That was my bad. So can you go to the next slide? So this is my Spotify profile. I also, over the past year, have been working on writing and recording and producing music in my bedroom. Can you go to the next slide? So this is me absolutely locked in a recording session. So yeah, I recorded and I wrote, recorded, and produced a 7-song album, which is on Spotify, and it has about 24,000 streams, and I peaked at 1,200 monthly listeners, and right now I'm around 900, as you just saw, because I haven't posted in a while. That's how it works. And yeah, so next slide. In the week leading up to Germany, I asked my 4 fans if they wanted to buy merch from me. And surprisingly, 20 people said yeah. So I went to a bunch of Goodwills and hit the mean streets of Pittsfield, and I got 20 shirts, and these are a couple of my favorite ones. I also block printed these. It's my mascot. Go back 2 slides. It's also printed on my jacket in the picture there. Okay, you can go back. Yeah, anyway, I still have to set up an online store to sell those, but I'm selling them out of the back of my car, so you can meet me in the parking lot afterwards if you want. Then, of course, I went to Germany, which is the reason that this was kind of a more non-traditional project. This was day 1 or day 2 in Berlin. I think Aiden was at a museum to work on his project, and the rest of the class was all outside, and we saw a guitarist, and we said, hey, this guy's pretty good, let's donate. And we went over, and we gave him a couple euros, and he said, do any of you guys play guitar? I was like, I play. And he basically shoved the guitar in my hands and was like, play something. So okay, I play a couple songs, and in the 5 minutes I was playing, 5 people came up and donated money. And I gave his guitar back, and he said, he was just this random Scottish dude, by the way. He was just in the middle of Berlin. He said, "Man, you've brought me great luck because I've been out here for 5 hours and no one's donated yet." But yeah, I think I was also extremely lucky because the school we went to was music focused. Yeah, it was every student had to know how to play one instrument and be in a part of one band. And my exchange partner was in the orchestra, and they had band once a week for about 2 hours. So I decided to go sit in on their band class, and it was great. I mean, they were amazing. Clearly knew what they were doing. But I was in orchestra for about an hour, and my exchange partner said, "They want you up in big band. They want you to observe." I said, "What?" So he walked me up to the jazz classroom and left me at the door and walked away. And I walked in. They didn't want me in big band. They didn't know who I was. They barely spoke English, and so they directed me to a chair, and I watched for the rest of the hour. And after their class, the teacher came up to me and he said, "You play jazz too?" And I was like, "I used to play a little piano, jazz piano. I play guitar now more." And he, again, shoved a guitar in my hands and a jazz chart, and I've never played jazz guitar. And was like, "Oh, we're going to do a little jazz combo now, you can join." So I had to look up all the chords on my phone, and I embarrassed myself in front of the entire class, which was really fun. So I'd like to thank Allison Larkin, definitely, and Ed Hamelrath, and Zach Andringa. I still don't know who Ringa is. And yeah, thanks everyone for coming.
Hello, everybody. I'm Oliver Graetz-Jackson, and I want to thank you for making it out tonight to the theater. This past year, I've been doing a lot of traveling, and with that traveling, this year with the German trip, I've been bringing along my camera. So as my senior project, I decided to present a year of photos along with some of my recent work. First slide. The first photo, I tried to experiment with shadows and lighting. I did so with a lot of the next photos, but this one in particular speaks to me. I know some of you might guess who that is. This was last year in Germany, in Berlin, and I like this piece because of its anonymity and its undisclosed location. It kind of really brings out its uniqueness. It's very mysterious. I really like it. Yeah, next slide. No, go back. This second photo was taken over the course of the German trip, which I did between March and April with the German class, as you know. It was a lot of fun, and of course I brought my camera with me. And I started to work on candid photos as well as side profiles, and this is a little bit of a combination of both. And this is one of the exchange students that we were staying with. Next slide. Then this next one has a lot of similarities to the first one in the fact that it also has a distinct anonymity. However, obviously with two people instead of one. This was an interesting night of photos, actually. It was very spontaneous. Me and my classmate Jay, with his friend Lucius, decided to go out at like 2 a.m. into Great Barrington, ghost town at the time, and they were just skating around. Yeah, and I decided to bring my camera with me and took some pictures, and that is probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite. There's another one on here, which is the next slide. This, in my opinion, is one of the best photos, if not the best photo I've ever taken when it comes to mid-action shots and motion and stuff. This was the same night Lucius and I went out into town with Jay, and I told Lucius he should try and do a trick off the stairs. This is the little hallway area by the co-op. And he didn't land it, but it looked pretty cool when I took the picture. So, yeah, next slide. All right. One thing I had realized was that I'd kind of become addicted to specific subjects, which was mostly people, and I thought I'd switch it up a little bit and try something new. So on our German trip, we were traveling in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, and I saw a lot of unique architecture that you don't really see in America because, as previously mentioned, it's way older. You don't really see anything past 200 or 300 years old here. And so I thought I'd take a picture of some of the architecture, and it turned out so nicely. I really like the photo because it's a single tower just existing, even though it's in the middle of a bustling city. And it just has a certain calm or peace to it. Next slide. And this is similar, but also completely different. The last photo seemed pretty static and calm. This, you can see the heads of bustling foot traffic. This was in Munich as well, in Bavaria. And yeah, I mean, as you can see, the surrounding buildings seem a lot more modern and well kept. This is, I'm pretty sure, an abandoned building, but there was a huge construction site around it. And I was also playing with motion with the people around it, and I thought it just came together really nicely. Next slide. Yep. This is something I was trying to play with the lighting because it was super hot out that day. And this is something I just saw in passing with my camera. We were walking to, I'm pretty sure, some museum or something. And I saw this little boy enjoying the music of this busker looks miserable, actually. I'm realizing that now. But he was really enjoying music, and I just thought it was a great photo, and the sun really just cast like a really beautiful shadow. So I thought I'd take a picture. Next slide. Yeah. So the first now the next photos I decided to bring back to our own class because I know they've been kind of all over the place when it comes to location. This is the first photo I took that was completely set up beforehand. I take most of my photos just in passing or when I'm just walking around and I see something that I like. But this is Aiden, as you saw before, who presented. And I thought to myself that I really wanted to try doing a photo of, like a profile photo of someone with light and shadow at the same time. And I thought it turned out really great. So, yeah, and next slide. This photo I originally was not going to share just because when I took the photo and I looked on the camera screen, it was completely out of whack. It was blurry. It was just all over the place. And I kind of just looked over it, and then when I found it in post on my computer, I was going through all my photos, and I thought it looked really cool. I don't know what it is about it. It's just like shaky, but also it shows the exact image that it's like the subject that it's supposed to be. So it's not like you can't tell what it is, but you can at the same time, if that makes sense. I don't really know what that means, but yeah, so this is, again, Jay. This was during our production of the Shakespeare play. I was able to go backstage in the lighting booth and everything and take photos of everybody. Not too many of the photos turned out great because the lighting wasn't amazing, but for that exact reason, that's why I like this photo. It's dark, but it also has that warm backlight, and the shakiness just makes it super interesting and cool to look at. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I really loved taking these photos, and I'm definitely going to keep taking photos. And I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I hope you enjoy the next presentations. Thank you.
Hello. Today I'll be telling you what I spent my internship on. I worked on 3D modeling in Blender. Now, it might not seem that complicated just from the name, but trust me, it is. Completing just one course took me the entire time. Learning Blender is essentially learning a new language and building a marionette doll at the same time. And even now, I still don't quite have a full grasp over everything it can do. Can you go to the next? Yeah. 3D modeling is a way to digitally create objects and use them in various ways, such as video games or art renderings. This is how I start my progress. Can you go to the... I start off with a shape, usually a cube or a flat plane, which I then resize and adjust to my liking. Then I go into the Properties menu and apply the scale so they're all equal. If you don't do this, your model can turn south very, very quickly. It can invert on itself and twist in weird, weird ways, which I did not capture for you, but it sucks. Then I open the Application menu and pick Subdivision Surface. What I'm describing will be playing on the screen as I say, but maybe not synced completely. You'll have to use your imagination. This subdivision surface is essentially a shortcut. It adds more vectors to manipulate immediately instead of me having to add them manually. Then I go into the Edit Object menu and begin to manipulate the object. Manipulating the object takes a lot of effort, and I won't be able to go through all the steps here, but essentially I can do 3 things: rotate, scale, and move. I can do these 3 things to either individual points, edges, or faces. After I've shaped each part of the model individually, I can go on to add in colors. Next. I can make the surfaces glow, be metallic, etc. I can also add lighting of any shade, which is a blessing. Then I can use the puppet. Then I can manipulate the puppet using the animation timeline. Next. I hurt my back figuring this out, by the way. It hurt for 3 days straight. My ibuprofen didn't help. To do this, all the parts of the puppets must be joined together so they can move on their own and in tandem with each other. For example, each fingers, yes, each of the little individual segments are different things that can be manipulated on their own. Yes, it's a pain. You have to join them all together in tandem and then attach them to the hand, which then must be attached to the arm, and then when you attach them, you parent them, which is essentially if you move the original object, it can be moved on its own. But then if you move the hand it's attached to, the hand and the object move at the same time. It's a whole thing. And then I pull up the animation timeline. Can I go to the next one? And set the pose I've manipulated into. Once you do that a whole bunch of times, you can make your little guy move as much as you want. To be honest, this was very, very hard, but it was a really fun skill to learn. I always wanted to learn how to do 3D modeling, and even though it was difficult and kind of a slog, I know how to do it now. The neural pathways in my brain have been opened. Thank you for all of you for coming, and thank you to my friend for naming this robot, whose name is Lightstick, which I don't think is a good name, but that's okay.
Hello, and thank you all for coming. My name is Iris Davis, and for my project, I created 37 pieces of functional ceramics out of porcelain. Okay. I learned that I like ceramics when I was pretty young. I was introduced to clay in kindergarten, and after that, I'd opt for almost every pottery opportunity I had. I attended a summer camp, and I enthusiastically signed up for the pottery class. That was the first time I was introduced to wheel throwing. I watched my counselor sit in front of the wheel and make a bowl quickly and evenly, and I wanted to try. I was too young and too small, and I could barely hold half a pound of clay, let alone make something out of it. Once I was old enough, though, I tried wheel throwing again and decided I was going to do it. So, 3 6-week-long wheel throwing classes later, I decided that's what I wanted my senior project to be. I got a membership at Ugly Mud Studio, which is a pottery studio, Oscar's dad's pottery studio, in Ghent, New York, which is about 7 minutes away from my house. In these photos, that's me at the end of the throwing process of that bowl, and then that other one is the same bowl, but I'm trimming it. Those are 2 different parts of the process of making a piece. Okay, you can show the next one. Okay. This is a time lapse of me poking holes in the colander that is right there. I get very focused and get very close to it. It becomes like this far away from my face, and I get usually clay on my face somehow. But yeah, so I've always had a hard time starting and keeping up with long-term projects. So I was a little nervous about this one, but the first morning I went into the studio with a notebook and a few skimpy sketches and a couple of notes, and I was really excited. The second week, I finished what my mom and I called the first round. I brought home about 12 pieces, a combination of old work and new work. I was excited when I had company at the studio. I was excited when I was alone and it was rainy and gloomy. You can do the next one. Oh, perfect. Trimming, which you guys saw in the first slide, is when you shape the bottom of your piece, you add the foot, which is the ring that it sits on. You have to wait for about 2 days after you've thrown the piece when it's in its prime, I guess. With the right tools, clay that's leather hard, which is the consistency of the clay after a few days, it trims easily and scrapes off like ribbons. After you trim, you sign the bottom, and your piece just needs to dry before it can be fired for the first time. The whole process takes a lot of patience and steady hands, and I was not made with a lot of patience or steady hands. I had to learn to read my mood by the day. Maybe today would be a throwing day or a trimming day, or maybe work was so bad the day before I could only bring myself to look for inspiration and references. Maybe I was so immersed in my ceramics I completely forgot about my shift at Dairy Queen that started 30 minutes ago. I never forgot about my ceramics, though. I was still excited about my ceramics. I'm still excited about my ceramics. I'd go 3 times a day just to make sure my handles weren't cracking or to rehydrate something I left uncovered for too long. And after school started again, I did 2 studio visits, both with ceramicists whose work is very much about interior design and sculpture. What I've made is all functional, but that did not make my visits any less interesting. I learned how they do their work, their methods in glaze making and vessels and construction. Jeremy Anderson was from Brooklyn. He made lights with hundreds of handmade beads and vessels with personalities and individual stories. He had experimented with countless glazing and coloring methods and explained to me what his favorites turned out to be. Pamela Sunday was in Catskill, and when I visited her, she was working on a commissioned tile piece that took up the entire floor of her studio. Every tile had 3 dimensions. It was all 3-dimensional. They all had different textures, and all the tools she used showed me how many tools I could use and how many different things you can do, and there's kind of endless when it comes to clay. Okay, next. Okay, so these are 2 arrangements of my final projects, my final products, sorry, my father and I put together. When I was younger, I really loved sand and mud and anything that I could shape with my hands. Now when I'm working with clay, it feels familiar and it feels right. Finding an art form that I felt comfortable with was a search I started when I was really young. My mom's a painter and my dad's a photographer, and I was very much exposed to their art forms and other art forms, but I didn't know what was mine, and I wanted mine. And I guess I found it. My parents' support and knowledge as artists of their own was one of the most important parts about this project. I wouldn't have been able to do half of what I did without the 2 of them. They've been through the steps every artist has to take. They knew what steps I needed to take. I'm very lucky to have them. My dad took all of the photos you guys have seen tonight, of mine. And he went with me to every studio visit. So thank you for my parents, especially my father, for guiding and supporting me through my project. And thank all of you for coming tonight.
Hi, I'm Cecelia Clary, and I went on the trip to Argentina this past spring. I'm going to talk about our trip to Iguazu Falls and our time in the city, Buenos Aires. Okay, so when we got to the city, we had a hard time keeping track of Profe in the crowds, so we bought her a balloon, but the balloon didn't last, so we ended up putting my AirTag in her purse and tracking her through the entire city. On the first day, we went to the Malba, or the Latin American Museum of Art, where we saw a Frida Kahlo exhibit and many other works of art, including Diego Rivera pieces. The city was very clean and there was a surprising amount of greenery, but we weren't impressed by the food in Argentina at all. It was actually really bad, unfortunately. So we ended up making most of our meals on our own. We took a subway to Casa Rosada, which is like the White House of Argentina where the president lives. That's our group in front of it. We spent 4 days in the city before we split up the group. 6 of us and our chaperone Dorian went to Iguazu Falls in the far north. On our first day in Iguazu, it was pouring rain, and we couldn't see the falls, but on the second day, we took a 7 a.m. bus to Iguazu National Park and hiked to see the falls. Iguazu is made up of 270 waterfalls and is on the border of Brazil and Argentina. We were right across from the border of Brazil and could see the storms on the Brazilian side, but it was beautiful on the side that we were. And the trails were packed with people and it was very touristy. But here's one of the best pictures I took that I think shows the falls well. We all got shots to go to Iguazu Falls for the mosquitoes that were supposed to be there, but there wasn't a single mosquito there. And all of the mosquitoes were in Escobar, and no one had shots for those mosquitoes that carried the dengue fever that 3 of us contracted, so that was sad. But we flew back and we regrouped before we went to Patagonia, and then after Patagonia, we flew back to Buenos Aires, and we spent our last few days exploring La Boca, which is a small town made up of colorful buildings. San Telmo, which is a huge street market that stretches 11 blocks, and La Recoleta, which is a huge cemetery right in the center of the city, which is filled with notable people's tombs, and it's like a little city and there are streets in it, and it was really pretty. Thank you to Profe for taking us on the trip. It was definitely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and thank you to the school and for everyone who came tonight.
Good evening. My name is AnneMae Cashen. I travel to Argentina with our school, but tonight I will be talking about my project, which is separate from that language trip. For my senior project, I worked with Equal Exchange. Equal Exchange is a food import business based out of West Bridgewater, Massachusetts. This is their logo. They operate with a fair trade business model and work with small farms all over the world. They bring produce, next slide, such as bananas, avocados, tea, chocolate, and many other items to the United States. It is then packaged and sold to food co-ops and health food stores all over the country. For my project, I spent about a month working with Nicole Vitello, the vice president of Equal Exchange. We spoke weekly, this is us. We spoke weekly and discussed the history of Equal Exchange, the cooperative business model, and funding opportunities, as well as learning about how they involve communities in all aspects of their business. Equal Exchange started out as a small coffee purchasing company. Their first shipment of Nicaraguan coffee was released by U.S. Customs on May 1st of 1986. Since then, they have added other coffees, teas, chocolates, nuts, avocados, and bananas to their sales. As of the end of 2023, they had 100 worker owners and about $70 million in sales income. Worker owners are people who both run the cooperative and own it. After working with a mentor for 1 year, employees have the opportunity to become part owners. I spent a day meeting a few of these worker owners and getting a closer look at what they do. When I visited Equal Exchange on May 1st and 2nd, I got the chance to attend a staff meeting. There was a discussion about the history and progress of Equal Exchange in light of their 38th anniversary. Nicole then spoke about a crowdfunding campaign that recently successfully concluded in the end of April. After this update, an expert who specialized in coffee roasting discussed her work and helped educate the group. I'm excited about Equal Exchange because it combines real agriculture and business, blended with social values. This project has furthered my interest in what I hope to study in college, which is agricultural business. Unlike many other import businesses that sell the same types of products, Equal Exchange pays farmers a fair price and charges consumers a fair price. The recent crowdfunding campaign raised over $600,000, which will be used to buy equipment and supplies for the business. Some of that money will also be given to farmers to cover upfront expenses on their end. Going to their headquarters really made me see what is involved in working for a company like Equal Exchange. Everyone I met spoke Spanish, which was exciting because fluency has always been a goal of mine. In addition, I'm going to school for business, and I can see how my degree, combined with my interest in Spanish, could be used in the real world. I would like to thank a few people before finishing up. First off, my parents, especially my mother, who encouraged me to reach out to Nicole in the first place. But most of all, I would like to thank Nicole, who took the time to educate me in all things Equal Exchange. Finally, I'd like to thank Berkshire Waldorf for offering this opportunity to seniors, and thank you all for coming tonight. Good night.
Good evening. I'm Jay Blake from Oliver's presentation. For my senior internship, I apprenticed as a farmer at Howden Farms in Ashley Falls. Howden Farms is owned and operated by Bruce Howden, who is the mentor of my project. I chose this project because I've been interested in agriculture and have worked at a different farm in Great Barrington for the last 4 years. Put a slide. What was the Bruce? Oh. I didn't realize the slide was up. I chose this project because I've always been interested in I just read that. God damn. The Berkshires is known for agriculture and farming, and I feel lucky to have a place like Howden Farms to do my internship. Okay, now you can go. My internship focused on helping Bruce get his farm ready for summer. One of the first things I did was take soil samples from 4 different fields where 4 different plants are grown, including raspberries, blueberries, and asparagus. I sent the samples off to get tested so we would know what vitamins and nutrients needed to be added or reduced so that the soil would be sufficient for the plants that are grown at the farm. The main vegetable crop I worked with was asparagus. The asparagus are grown in strips, as you can see in the picture. There's the strips. Where am I? I tilled the strips with a rototiller and hand-weeded the asparagus strips so they'd be able to sprout. Asparagus can live for 15 to 30 years. They are perennials, which means they don't have to be replanted each year, but they cannot be harvested unless they are very well cared for. This is the first year in several years that asparagus has been harvested at Howden's, and my work allowed the farm to grow and sell asparagus this year. So that's after I hand-weeded. Doesn't look like much, but it took like 4 hours. Next slide. After 2 weeks, the asparagus started to sprout. I harvested the plants by cutting them under the soil with a harvest knife and collected them all into a straw basket. I washed them and cut them all to a similar length and packaged the asparagus for sale. I weighed out £1 for each package. Wait, I should say that one. When the asparagus are overgrown, they are unharvestable. Then go one more. Those are the asparagus. After like 5 hours, you really have to get it very correct. Along with the asparagus, Along with the asparagus, I weighed, cut off the roots, and packaged rhubarb. I didn't know you ate the roots of rhubarb and not the leaves. I don't know how. One day, I ate one of the leaves because I thought that was the part you're supposed to eat. 15 minutes later, I felt terrible. So I looked up, is rhubarb safe to eat, raw, on my phone. It was then I learned that rhubarb leaves are poisonous. Bruce Howden was a great mentor, and I'd like to thank him for letting me do my internship at his farm, as well as putting up with the number of things I broke, like a lawnmower, a fertilizer pallet. Working with Bruce taught me how much labor is included with farming. I learned that farming is much more about using your hands than it is about using tractors and equipment. Farming is tough, and you have to be a certain type of person to do it for a living. I have a different kind of respect for the farmers as a result of my internship. Next year, I'll be studying business at University of Buffalo, and I hope to combine my interest in farming and agriculture with what I learn about business. There's the rhubarb and asparagus for sale at Howden Farms, if anyone wants them. I'd like to thank my parents for encouraging me, supporting me throughout this project, and my friends and my girlfriend for bringing me food and letting me use her car when mine was broken down. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Jaeden Alston, and I traveled with the Spanish students to Argentina for 18 days, during which we stayed 4 days in Escobar. Next slide, yep. While in Escobar, we stayed with students from the local Waldorf school, Clara de Asís, and experienced their daily routine. This is me eating with my family. This experience allowed me to push through the uncomfortable and try to embrace the unknown. When I first arrived at my host family's house, there was a misunderstanding about my vegetarianism, which led to immediate conversation in what I can only say was Spanglish about this reality, which ended and led to many more interesting conversations. Each day we would go with the students to the school, next slide, and experience probably about an hour of school before carpooling to what will be the first Camp Hill village in Argentina. Next slide. While there, we helped stain wood for our building, move ceramic building materials, as well as feeding the cows. One memorable experience for me came when we were clearing the pasture of brush and putting it in a nearby fire. During this time, the mosquitoes were rampant, which resulted in us running around frantically, at least me, while trying to pick up sticks. It is also worth noting that at this point, I was wearing long sleeves to try and create another barrier, which in the end did not help much. I would also be remiss to not note that there was a bonding as us Americans swore at the mosquitoes in English, while the Argentinian students swore at them in Spanish. We all felt the same, that is for sure. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the Berkshire Taconic Foundation for your grant that allowed the trip to truly be possible. It would not have been possible without your collaboration and generosity. This is my first abroad trip. Oh yeah, this is us cooking the last day at the Camp Hill for all of us and the students. This was my first abroad trip in all of my educational career, and I believe that everyone should travel the world as it gives you a little bit different of an outlook on life. Immersing yourself in a culture is a unique experience that will leave you with lifelong memories and maybe even friendships. I personally want to be fluent in Spanish at one day, and this may have just been a building block as it exposed me to a Spanish culture more fully than ever before. With a niece who will grow up bilingual, Spanish and Spanish culture is now more important to me. If you have the chance to travel, seize it. I want to say thank you to the school for allowing this to be an opportunity that I had, as well as Julia Nunez and Dorian for chaperoning and making this possible. Thank you.
The class of 2024 invites you to our graduation this Sunday, June 9th at 2 p.m. at the First Congregational Church in Stockbridge. We hope to see you there.
Well, you've already cheered for them, but everyone please join me in honoring and thanking the great class of 2024. Thanks for coming, and good night.